welcome to episode 89 of Mo Money, the investing economics show for millennials by a millennial, where our goal is to educate, entertain, and empower a new generation of investors. I am, of course, your host, MC Mo. Now let's get to the money. In episode 87, we spoke about modern monetary theory, or MMT, a fringe monetary theory that has recently been pushed into the mainstream discourse thanks to policy proposals by politicians like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The theory solves the "how are we going to pay for this" problem that often trips up politicians when pressured about the fiscal consequences of their policy by politicians, constituencies, and media pundits. If you did not watch episode 87, then I suggest that you go back and you watch it right now before I even think about continuing. Go ahead. I'll wait. I'm not busy. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to wait. I'll summarize it for you. Essentially, in a nutshell, MMT describes our current monetary system for what it is, but also for what it could be. It states that since the United States government is the only entity who can create dollars, they can print enough dollars to pay for anything that's priced in dollars, including paying back their debts. If the government budget says $1 billion for a wall, boom, it creates $1 billion for a wall. If the budget says $3 trillion for bombs and planes for a new war, boom, trillions are created. If the budget says a few trillion more for healthcare for all, for infrastructure, for guaranteed jobs, for guaranteed basic income, it's not a problem. Just create the dollars. If there is inflation in the economy, the government simply raises taxes and the dollars are essentially destroyed, and that prevents the overheating of the economy. It's that simple. Now, Stephanie Kelton, who is arguably the most well-known modern monetary theorist and the economic advisor to Bernie Sanders during his 2016 presidential campaign, is very active on Twitter and has a great ability to explain the theory to the masses. So with its popularity rising and me being the attention whore that I am, I did an episode explaining the basics about MMT, and I wanted to give it a fair shake. But I feel that it's also important for me to do a critique explaining the possible negative consequences about modern monetary theory. My first critique of MMT is that the government chooses the winners in the economy. And look, I know that our current system is pure corporatism and lobbyists and the capital that backs them in Washington. It wields a lot of power, but MMT, which champions itself as a populist-type monetary policy, would do little to correct this. It would actually probably make it much worse. In order for money to enter into the economy, it must be created and spent into the economy by the government. And in order for them to do that, they must choose the companies they will reward with contracts to carry out their budget. It'd be naive to think that we can get elected officials to suddenly start awarding government contracts purely on merit and not by lobbying and other forms of nepotism. The less chances the government has for picking winners and losers, the better it is for everyone else. The second critique of MMT is that no matter how much money the government spends, there is little proof that the result will be an increase in long-term economic growth. The theory makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, a world where college is free, healthcare is free, everybody has good paying jobs, and well, everything's good. But the problem is that there has to be productive and efficient growth somewhere. Trillions of dollars of debt has been accumulated over the past 4 to 5 decades, but productive economic growth is not growing at nearly the same pace as it was before the government started worrying less and less and less about the national debt. Spending money on consumer goods and other forms of consumption and financial assets, well, it does not produce the same economic growth as saving and prudent investments that unlock new value within a society. In short, all this spending leads to a misallocation of resources by the economy. And instead of being able to correct itself when things start to go bad, the government panics and spends more, making the problem even worse. With more and more money being created, and that money chasing after the resources that are budgeted by the government, if there's a misallocation and no efficient production of those resources, we will arrive at my third critique. The third critique of MMT was briefly mentioned before in episode 87, and that is inflation. Now, since the financial crisis, the government has injected trillions of dollars into the economy, which caused the more fiscally conservative politicians and financial types to predict that with all this newly created money and interest rates at 0%, runaway inflation and hyperinflation must be right around the corner. But it's been 10 years and this is proven not to be the case. So perhaps a government can manage to control inflation during periods of increased debt finance spending. But is inflation even correctly calculated? And for how long can they keep it under control? Inflation has remained close to the 2% target since the financial crisis, but many necessities average Americans rely on have increased at a greater pace, and wages have not risen enough to make Americans feel financially secure. Politicians often don't foresee inflation being a problem until it's a big problem, and by that point, it's like trying to tame a California wildfire. Bottom line is this: MMT is still a theory. It has never been practiced in a real-world economy, and as a theory, it works, and it makes perfect sense. All the money is accounted for. The inflation models, the growth models, all can be used to prevent overheating, yada, 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 but you cannot plan an economy, because you can never fully plan for what humans are going to do. There's just too many variables. But with that said, you cannot win a debate against an MMT advocate since it's never been tried, so you can never prove him wrong and say that it won't work. It's like when you try to point out a flaw about capitalism and someone goes, well, that's not real capitalism, or that's not real socialism. Again, these are just my critiques of the shortcomings of the theory. I assure you Stephanie Kelton, Warren Mosler, and Bill Mitchell could easily rebuke my critiques, but until it's tried, neither of us would be wrong, and hopefully it remains that way forever. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Mo Money. You can find new and classic episodes right here on YouTube. For now, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, like me on Facebook.
Mo Money signing out.